What's up, people? Welcome back to another episode clip of the Podcast. Just a reminder that these are only the shortened clips, and if you want to listen to the full episode, make sure you click the first link in the description below, or alternatively, you can type in the Podcast on all your audio listening platforms. And without further ado, I'll catch you guys on the other side. If Joe Biden was in front of you right now, what would you like to say to Joe Biden?
What's up, baby? Take me out to dinner.
Hey, yo!
You are now listening to Breathe the Podcast with your host, Majaro.
What's up, people? Welcome back to another episode of the Podcast. You guys know what I'm going to say? Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, because we're trying to build a community here, and by sharing this with your friends and family, that goes a long way in helping us do that. And without further ado, let's get into it. You're obviously from DC, the DMV area. You're in the epicenter of all the legislative back and forths and the executive back and forths. You know, what do you think the political climate is like in DC right now? Well, in fact, let's not go right now. Let's go back to 2008. Go back to the promised one. The savior, the savior, Barack Obama. Yes, we can.
Big deal.
What was it like? What was it like for you coming through at that time?
So I actually, at that time, I don't know. It was really emotional. I thought it was like.
I was watching the inaugurations. I was watching the speeches and his campaigns. Yo, the amount of this guy was headlining TV, bro. Yeah. That's all you could talk about for that whole period, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it just. I feel like there is so many different things. There's a lot of intersection. He's Black. He's of African descent, which was like big, right? Yeah. Like his dad was like from Kenya, I think, right?
Yeah.
So I think as a person of color in the United States, we're always looking for something to kind of validate our existence, to make it, to like feel like American, right? It's a weird feeling, and I don't know if you feel that way in England, or sometimes you just kind of feel like this is my home, but then there are moments where you feel like it's not. Like you're always checked.
Yeah,
right?
you always check it in the shoulder.
Yeah, right? Every time you feel like, yes, I'm an American, something happens where like someone reminds you, like, not really. You're not American as the white American. You know, there are moments. So to be able to see that in the highest office, to see this Black man now, you're just kind of like, oh, okay. Like, I belong here. There is room to dream, and not to say that you couldn't dream before, but nothing felt off limits anymore.
Yeah. That was literally the rhetoric that a lot of people were talking about. I remember there was coverage of a really old lady. She was probably like 90 at the time, and she was probably there throughout the civil rights movement. And then she said, you know, now I can fully say that Martin Luther King's dream has become a reality. And I was like, wow, those are the powerful messages and messaging that was going out at the time. And you really felt like something could happen, change could actually come in terms of, I don't know, I feel like we were just gassed up. I feel like we all just got gaslit, in my opinion, because I was actually crying. I was up at night watching everything go down and him being announced as the president and the inauguration. Beyonce, come on, bro. Beyonce was there, Jay-Z. You saw everyone come out. You know, it's like my president's black, my Lambo's blue.
Yeah, president is black, my Lambo's blue, and my rims ain't too.
Like songs, anthems, everything. But then, and obviously the media, he was a media darling, so all the coverage, sound bites after sound bites. You already knew he had a career in making televisions or documentaries or whatever, like he's doing now. But obviously, everything started to, not go to plan. He started, there was a lot of gridlocks. A lot of the Republicans, obviously, because that's what, happens in America. Everyone stops each other from progressing. It's crazy to me. But it felt like towards the end, I feel like Obamacare was the only really good thing that came out of the presidency. That's just from the outside looking in. How was it like?
Yeah.
How did you feel when everything started to happen? Obviously, Bin Laden, that was a win for him. But like, is that really a win for the United States people? Like, especially Black America, who are looking at him to really make something tangible for them. Do you feel like he accomplished that?
I do think, unfortunately, like his presidency was more symbolic.
It was peak.
Than, you take it or leave it, right? Like, I think for me, like being in DC, I was in New York when he first got elected at that time, and then came back afterwards. So I was here for most of his second term. So definitely felt symbolic. I definitely felt that he had to play a role, because, and I think that kind of speaks to this idea, like Blacks are not like this monolithic, like we don't all think the same. We don't all operate the same. Yeah. So I definitely think that there was some hesitation for him to pass an agenda that focused
on Black people,
like improving, you know what I mean? Because I think as any person of color who sometimes is like the first, you're like, all right, I don't want to make it so that I'm the only, right? Like how do I play along to get along, right? So you have to be really strategic in like the things that you say, unfortunately, and the things that you do. So I think about that all the time. When you start to occupy spaces where you're the only person of color in that room, you don't want to be like, you always got to be on time. Like you can't ever
can't give him a reason to say it if you're not doing it.
Like, you don't want him to be the only Black president. And it was clear that was the thought. Like,
it was obvious. He said it. He openly said, I can't come out and be, Malcolm X and, shake up everything, because at the end of the day, I need their support. And already it's tough for me to get the support just by who I am with certain people. So I can't come with all this change because they're going to shut me down straight away. They're not even going to let me walk before I can run.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I think there's some people now who will go in with guns blazing, like, nah, I think he was very cautious and very strategic in how he carried himself. And not to say that's not his personality, because I think he is very moderate in his thought process. And I also think that he really believes in this democracy, which sometimes could be to your detriment, to really believe that we're all working for one thing, because people have other agendas.
Yeah, because obviously, right. So during COVID, there was this period, or before COVID to, in the midst of COVID, there was this period where I was super into American politics. Like, obviously, I watched the inauguration of Obama, so I feel like that was the start. And I did government and politics when I was at sixth form, which is like the in-between between high school and college/university. So during that time, I started getting into politics and seeing what it's about. And obviously, American politics was just so much more interesting. Like, the characters, the whole structure of it all felt very crazy, and it didn't quite make sense about electorate boards and stuff like that. So I came from a liberal, Democrat circle of Obama. Everything he touches is gold. The media love him. Everything he does is good. And then towards the end, when Trump started to come into power, you saw the media perspective switch from the president's great, to everything this president does is terrible. Like, you see the polar opposite. And that's when I started to be like questioning, thinking, I'm pretty sure Trump wasn't this bad guy. He was an apprentice. He's been seen with loads of celebrities. He had a really good approval rating at the time. He was fighting against Hillary Clinton, who, in my opinion, was not very likable at all. She was just dry as hell. And obviously, the more research I've done into her and her family, like, it's
not research.
Research, let's just say, into her family. They just felt unsavory. And Trump, he was definitely funny and interesting. So you saw the media switch on the president, whoever's in there, and that's when I started to dig in and be like, is everything he does bad? And then started to catch them on lies saying he did this and did that, or he's this and that. And then when I actually watch him for myself and be like, he's not as bad as people say he is, but you portray someone to be this bad, but then when you realize that they're a bit mid, it's like, what was all the hullabaloo? What do you think about the media's role in covering everything that happens in DC? Do you feel like they have a fair representation on both sides, or is it very us against them, which is what I feel like?
Well, I think in general now, like, media's coverage is very polarized. Like, I think people say, like, depending on your beliefs, you can probably find someone who mirrors that belief. So definitely, if you tend to be more liberal, you could definitely find like a media outlet that like speaks your views. And if you tend to be more conservative, you can find the media that kind of supports your views. I think the coverage of Trump, a lot of it was kind of like, all right, we all know that he is like this guy. Like, he's showing us who he is, right? Like, do you need to beat me over the head with that information? Probably not. But then also, that's their job. Like,
yeah, they're getting paid for that.
Yeah, like, they get paid for that. Like, if somebody was like, I mean, do you really have to doctor all the time? Like,
yeah.
Like, so you do have the option of turning it off. Like, even though it's bombarded into your face and like there's 24-hour news cycle, you don't have to participate in those 24 hours. I will say with Trump, and I didn't know if this is where you're going, is that so yes, I think at the time everyone thought it was like a joke. Like, I think everyone thought like, oh, there's no way. There is no way that this guy is moving forward. And then like when he was, people started getting really nervous. Like, he's actually like the candidate, and everyone thought like common sense would prevail. But I think the thing that about Trump that appealed to so many, he was not like the typical politician, right?
Yeah, that old chestnut.
And I think that they thought that like once he got into office, he would be different, or he would be serious about the position. I think there's some people who thought that. I don't know. I thought that some people might have thought that, yes, when he is in that position, he will come back to the liberal side that he was. So I think people were like, how bad could he really be? What his presidency has proved to me is that there's always this kind of underbelly of racism in this country, right?
Yeah.
And there is a social norm that tells you it's pretty unacceptable to be a racist, right? To not be empathetic of different religious groups, ethnicities, languages, whatever. And I think what his presidency did was make it be popular to not keep your mouth shut, right?
Yeah, like anti-culture, anti-PC culture.
Which is horrible, because I will tell you that most people of color do not believe that racism is gone, right? But we also know that you should know it's unpopular to be racist, right? Like,
everyone knows those things.
Right, and Obama's presidency did not get rid of racism, for sure.
Definitely not.
I think it made it unpopular for you to speak racist stuff because our president is black, and what does that mean? But no one thought racism was gone. And then to have that, and then to have this guy who was like, we don't have to keep our mouth shut. Like, Africans do come from a dirty country, and then we should ban them. And this is the person in the highest office who's saying that. Like, it's hurtful, right? To give people the power to say that, to be okay with it, to make it popular again. And like, I think now we're still trying to undo it, but people are saying whatever. It was a very dark.
Yeah, like you can tell what's happened since. So Trump came. Obviously, he's a social media and media magnet in itself. So anything he touches, is highlighted. And then you add the presidency on top of that, And he was breaking so many normal conventions in terms of, not going through the press office and, tweeting directly to his followers. Social media, that's when social media came into full effect. Like, anything he said, obviously, as a president, was amplified tenfold. So whenever he'll say something very controversial, literally people would, the news networks, their ratings went up whenever he said anything controversial, because they'll criticize, they'll have panels, they'll have, someone on this side and that side arguing, and that's when you get the polarization, the back and forth, and no one actually trying to resolve any issues. It felt like it was entertainment, essentially, because, like I said, American politics is a lot more entertaining than British politics. So loads of money is made from that. Do you actually believe that the majority of them, the legislative workers and the executives, actually want to change things, or do they just know and accept that they're going to have to be a cog in the wheel that keeps this gravy boat going, essentially, and keeping things the status quo? Because it feels like everyone campaigns on change in one way or form, but when they actually get there, nothing happens. You see that with Joe Biden to this day.
To this day!
Like, with gun crime going up, obviously mass shootings, racism prevalent everywhere. He says, I'm going to change this. Student debt, I'm going to forgive that. But it feels like a lot of talk and no action.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that, unfortunately, in our political system, like, you need to get, in order for things to, like, go ahead, like, we all have to be on the same page, which I feel like, for the most part, there's certain things that make sense. I think you do have to make a lot of compromises in politics. And then on top of that, like, we rely a lot on financial
backing. That's one of the things I was going to go into.
Yeah, so like if you really believe, and I think did you ever? I can't remember this show on Netflix with
House of Cards.
Yes.
Come on now, House of Cards. Yo, Kevin Spacey was the one before he got cancelled, though.
Yeah. But I didn't watch the whole. I remember watching it, and I remember I think it was the first season when this guy, you come into politics with like this ideal, like, I actually in a position to make things change, right? Mm-hmm. And then someone tells you, like, listen, I could give you $1 million, fund your next campaign so you can be here for another 5 years if you put the kibosh on this bill. Like, that's what happens, And I remember talking to a friend about this, because I have a friend who I'm like, I think you'd be perfect for politics. I think you're a disruptor. And I was like, and she was like, all money is blood money. You have to make so many concessions to stay relevant. Mm-hmm. And it's always going to be like this vicious cycle. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many people who have different interests. I mean, like, for instance, like, you know what Airbnb is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I did not realize that they had, like, hotels had lobbies. So now they have, like, all these Airbnb laws and like, in the United States. So for every interest or anything that needs to be, like, done, there's always going to be someone who's for it and against it, and they all have money, and they're all in somebody's ear. So, like, you would think, like, if I was going to rent out my house and, do an Airbnb, I have to make sure that the local laws will allow me to use my house as an Airbnb, because they have laws in the books that really prohibit you.
New ones.
Yeah, like, you can't use your private, like, if you wanted to, I was talking to somebody about this, like, if you wanted to use your primary address as an Airbnb, like, there are laws that won't allow you, because the hotels were like, we're losing money because of all these Airbnbs. So they really fought for there to be laws where they were, like, more stricter on, like, who can and what houses can be your area. So it's crazy. Like,
lobby groups have so much power, power. And obviously there are people, big wigs or billionaires invested in hotels, Trump being one of them. So if he sees the trend of the culture shifting this way, they're going to use their money and their, political leverage and power to, revert it back to the status quo. And that's the problem with, I feel like, America. Money, if you run the place, like, no one cares about how you feel or your situation. Money is going to talk over everything. So if you have more money than the next man, more chances you're going to get your decisions made ahead of the other person.
Oh yeah, you learned that.
And it's that I wouldn't even say soft. Would you call that corruption? Like, in my opinion, that seems a hella like corruption, because you're there to do a job for the people. The people let you there, but at the same time, for you to get to the people, you need sponsors and campaigns, and the people who are going to provide that are the people who want you to do something for them. So you're there for one thing, but you're actually doing another.
I mean, I think you can convince yourself of pretty much anything, right? Like, and I honestly think that at the time that people are making decisions, they don't think that they've like sold their soul.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, so if if someone came to you and was like, yo, we're going to sponsor your podcast, right? But you can never talk bad about X, Y, and Z. And you're like, no big deal. And then like something happens, you're like,
I can't say anything. Yeah.
It's a bit of a sticky one still.
Yeah, because
conflicts of interest.
Yeah, and I think, and it's not, and the thing about politics is not just one single donor; it's like multiple entities that are contributing, right? So, like, oh, like you can never talk about gun laws. Oh, done. You know what I mean? And then next, you know, it's like gun and education and like healthcare reform, and then you realize that you have a big muzzle that's really preventing you, you know. And if you truly believe that, like, well, at least I'm at the table. Right? Like, a lot of people convince us, so at least I'm at the table where discussions are being had and I can move this forward.
But that's where it stays. It stays at the table and it stays as a discussion, and there's no progression.
And so that's why people have issues with like what they call career politicians, because they're so embedded in the system. Like, they want disruptors. They want people who are like, man, I don't care about, you know, the money you're going to give me. I'm going to come in here and make change. And so you're there, and then you're like, but then you like, the cycle is so long. It's like 4 years, right?
Yeah. And a lot can happen in those 4 years.
Yeah. You're on different committees, and you're like, I'm in the right places. And then you're like, oh shoot, like I now have to run again. Mm-hmm. I need money.
Yeah. To finish what I started.
Yeah. To finish and like, you can convince yourself that like I can, but yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, going through the cycles of two presidents as a, you know, fully fledged adult, and seeing where we've come to where we are to where we're going with Joe Biden. If Joe Biden was in front of you right now, what would you like to say to Joe Biden?
What's up, baby? Take me out to dinner.
Hey, yo!
To me, he feels like he's just a figurehead. He's just, someone would say a puppet. Someone would say someone just to appease people, to say, you know, there's this person that's taking care of everything, but in the grand scheme of things, he's not actually doing anything. You know, we see with the mass shootings, he's not really made any executive orders. Like, people are saying, you know, pass some executive orders. Like, Trump did that a lot, like, at least to stem the bleeding until we can resolve something in terms of actually getting legislative hard laws that will prevent it. But obviously, the gun lobbyists, they don't want, you know, government contracts when it comes to buying weapons from gun manufacturers. The domestic and international markets when it comes to guns are basically intertwined. Like, there's not much of a barrier anymore in terms of the gun laws. So do you feel like he's even doing anything?
I think one of the problems that makes it really hard with the gun laws is that it's in the Constitution, right? And so that's always going to come up, unfortunately. I do think that he truly believes that he can reach out to like the conservatives and pass something. So I really do think that, unfortunately, he's one of those people who like, no, I'm charismatic enough.
What? Bro, what are you talking about?
He's not. Yeah, I saw him fall over his bicycle the other day. How are you getting up from that? I don't know how.
I mean, there's some people who really, no, I'll talk to them. We'll get something. I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about it, and they were like, there are politicians who really believe in government, who really believe that the system works, right? Like, you know, when you watch TV and they talk about lawyers and they're like, I really believe the legal system works. People, it's the goal is to provide justice, but you realize the system is broken. Like, there are things that are really broken and beyond repair. So I think it would be hard for him to pass an executive order without them being that would be executable, right? Like if we were in a government system where he'd be like, all right, everyone, no more guns, like that's not possible.
Yeah.
So if he was right here next to me, I would be like, forgive my student loans. That would
Straight
probably
away
be like the most pressing issue.
Yeah.
And I also would tell him to fight dirty. Like, I think that's the issue. I think sometimes like some liberals, or even him, like mostly him, let me just say him, like they want to play nice, they want to play respectable politics, but then you have to realize that the people on the other side are not playing the same game that you're playing, right?
They try to act like we're conservatives and we're prim and proper, bruh. So obviously, there's a wide range, especially with the alt-right and everything in between. Yeah. Like, it's a very diverse group as well.
Yeah. And they're much, because they don't care about getting their hands dirty, you know, and doing the things that are unpopular. And I think that we try too hard to put a pretty face on it and like come off as like, I'm going to bring respect back into this office. I want this to mean something. And I think sometimes people think about their legacy as well. Like, I want to go down in like history books. And I'm like, I think you're not going to win that way. You're not going to be effective. So you play dirty. Like that, to me, that would be like, because they're not playing nice. They're not going to come around. You're not going to be able to talk to them. Play dirty.
Yeah. Like, I would say on that note, one of the things that's come from this conversation is realizing that at the end of the day, you know, these are people. They're not gods. They might be elected to do one thing, but you know, they've got interests of themselves. They've got their own self and their family to look after, their own, like you said, legacy. And sometimes those conflict with what, you know, they actually want to achieve. They say they want to achieve. Like, humans are very flawed and very, you know, complicated. So, you know, at the start, or when I started to realize this, I was very, you know, angry that these people are just, they don't care. Yeah. But sometimes they just don't even see. They feel like they think that they're doing a good job, but, you know, from the outside looking in, you can see that they're not. But to them, looking and being inside and being in that bubble, that's a very thick bubble. You know, they think they're doing the good job, as you can see with Boris Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I honestly, I like to try and see the good in people if possible. I don't always see it because there's a couple of people that I really don't like. Shots fired. Yeah, no, right? I really do think that people think that they can help people, but I also think that there's a lack of insight. And that's the thing that always scares me about politics, is that oftentimes you forget about everyone else because you're so in your own way.
Yeah.
And I just wish people just had more empathy. Like, that's my thing about whenever they're passing laws or they're getting on the stand and talking about X, Y, and Z, they're really only talking from their own like self-interest and not everyone else that they serve. So I think it's very easy sometimes for men, and not all men, but like men to be like, oh, you know, women's rights, like da 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 da.
Yeah, yeah. Who cares about them? Oh, come on.
Who cares about them? And you know, and sometimes I feel the same way about conservatives when people are like, oh, like I feel like I'm conservative. I'm like, first of all, conservatives are never on the right side of history, because conservatives at one point thought black people weren't people, right? So like, at the end of the day, when you look at the course of history, like conservatives are never on the winning side of history, right? Second, I think being a conservative is, I feel like sometimes only the right of privilege, right? Yeah. Because in order to be like conservative, like you have to be in a position of power and be in a position of privilege. And so it's very easy to be like, because
being in that position, that's a good position, right? Having power, having wealth, having control over certain things. So if you have someone that's a liberal who wants to change that and give the power to someone who's disenfranchised, you're not going to want to do that because that's going to affect your body, your people, or your bread, your money. So you'll rather everything stay the same how it is, and that's how, you know, the conservatives and liberals function. You know, the right wants to keep everything the same, the good old days.
Yes!
And the liberals want to be like, yo, there's people starving because of those days, and there's people who've been adversely affected because of those policies back in the day. Let's go back and fix it. And the other side is saying, no, let's keep it the same.
Let's keep it the same. Let's go back. And it's crazy because I feel like they were at the top, but like so many people suffered during that time. And it's not like just because they have power, they have rights, that yours are gone. Like that, it's not a zero-sum game. Like,
it's not.
Because they have, and I think that's what they believe. Like if they have privilege and access, like if they don't have student loans, like now they have more money in their pockets to achieve things that like only we had access to, right? Can you imagine if I didn't have my 6-figure debt? I'd be like, I have a bigger house. Like I can do all of those things, but like I'm straddled by it because I decided to choose a profession of X, Y, and Z. So like those things really always like in my mind. I'm not trying to take anything from you. I just want to have access to the same things that you have access to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for taking the time out to come.
Wait a minute.
Whoa.
Well, because I was like, all right, I'm going to, since we talked a lot about the American experience, I was like, this is an opportunity for us to have some banter and put some fun into like your podcast. So I have like a couple questions.
Okay, you got a couple questions for me. Hey, let's go. I'm ready for this.
Yeah, all right. But these are really fun, not too heavy because I know we have a time limit. All right. So, who had the better album? Burna Boy's African Giant or Kid Made in Lagos?
Ah, stop it. No. They are both so good. So good. Yes. I feel, honestly, I can't. Ah, Wizkid, Burna Boy.
I know, those two albums, they came out the
same time. And they have the same impact on me. Like, I can listen to them back to back and it won't...
Absolutely. So,
Thames... that Thames track, though, really got me. Essence and Lost in Lake.
That wasn't my favorite on... Oddly enough, I really love Ginger. I don't know why. Yeah. That whole album, yeah.
The whole album. But Burna Boy, though. Everything on Burna Boy's...
That's a hard one, right?
Yeah, I would have to say, just Wizkid, just by a little, just like literally by 1%, Wizkid, Wizkid.
I'm not gonna lie, that's a hard one because Burna Boy was like all African pride for me. I mean, definitely Wizkid is my favorite album because I literally would have it on repeat and I could listen from start to finish, not skip a song. But Burna Boy, definitely, like, I was like, my chest was out with that one. I was like, yo, yeah. All right. What was the better city to visit, Toronto or DC?
Come on. You're really putting me in this one now. I'm sorry, but I've got to say Toronto. Like,
I know.
Yeah, come on. It's just got a special place in my heart.
No,
just
I get it.
So many memories and good ones and meeting loads of the family there. Like before, it would have been a toss-up. But I would have said Toronto because I spent more time there, more physical time there. But after the wedding happened, it's undeniable. Like, I'll probably put some clips or do like a little short of our time in Toronto.
I don't think you have the facilities for that, big man.
Yeah, that was very special. That was very special.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised. I mean, when you came in, I can't even remember. It was like what?
It felt like it was the same year, right? Wasn't this? Or like there was? I think it was like 2 years or 2 years before.
4.
Was it 4 years before?
4 years before, and we were still working. I mean, it was just like I remember we were like, "Hey, here's the Metro map. Have fun."
Yeah.
I mean, now that I'm a lot older, I can be like a better host, but definitely things were different. And then like in Toronto, like we just had more freedom of movement, you know, go out, do your thing all day and then come back to uncle's house and have a barbecue.
We were all on, it was literally full on holiday vibes.
It was, yeah. So I'm not mad at that. All right. Favorite Nigerian food, jollof rice or egusi?
I love a goosey soup, you know. I love it. Yeah, I love it. But you can't go wrong with jollof rice. Okay, are you talking about them at their peaks or? It depends, because a goosey soup on its peak, that's something different. But jollof rice is good as well. But like with African foods, it can vary from the ingredients, who's it made by, was it done with love and care,
I know it's really hard because I feel like with the goosey soup, not everyone, like you can have so many bad goosies, but you can't have too many bad jollof rice with the right people. Yeah.
Nah, but you can though. Like I've had a lot of jollof rice from a lot of different people, so that's probably why I've seen the good, bad, and ugly.
Well, so I don't know if you've, because in Maryland we have like a really big Nigerian community. I think Maryland has like the biggest concentration in the U.S.
Oh wow!
Either I heard like it's DC, Atlanta, and Houston are like the big three epicenter of Nigerian cultures.
Yeah.
And so we have jollof wars.
Jollof wars with each other or with like other Africans. Like Ghanaians.
Yeah, like with each other. So it's like Liberian jollof.
Oh, yeah.
Nigerian, I mean, I personally always think Nigeria should win. But yeah, people take it seriously here.
Okay. Okay, I would have to say jollof rice because, like you said, it's harder to go wrong with that, especially if you're going from someone who's from there. Like, and they can also put their own, twist on it with whatever chicken they have with it, the salad dressings or the coleslaw, homemade coleslaw. Man. You can actually mix it up probably a lot more. But with a goosey, you're looking for that one specific.
Yes.
That taste.
All right, so I'm going to end my questions there, but I was like, now I feel like I know you now.
Thank you. Oh my God, this was a great episode. Thank you for coming and interacting with the people, shedding some light on some questions that, some people might have had. If people are thinking of moving to the United States, the information on health and insurance would definitely help people. But, you guys have been listening to me, your host Majaro, and my guest Tope on the Podcast. Would you say America's a dream or a nightmare? What would you say?
It's still a dream.
It's still a dream. We'll leave it at that. Well, thanks for listening, guys, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode. Peace.
Said I wake up every morning, pray to God that I'm fixing up. Hope I'm never slipping up. Hear the money calling, need my peace to start getting up. Feeling like I'm blessed, but it came with a bit of luck. Feeling like you stressed, then the tension starts to fill you up. Need an intermission, yeah, they ain't the same lane as us. Come from different sticks, yeah, they're not the same range as us. They cop the pleas and top of teas, they're not hitting range with us.